Hi everybody, this is Anne. One thing we all have in common as potters is that bucket of reclaimed clay in our studio. It just sits there like the annoying chore you know you eventually have to do something with. In this video, I'm going to show you one thing you can do with those sloppy reclaims that'll turn your pottery into elegant, unique pieces. I'm starting with a simple cylinder that I threw on the wheel. While still fresh, I traced two border lines to divide it so it had a broad space in the center for a design. Then I lightly freehanded magnolia blossoms. I then took out some of the reclaimed clay chunks from my bucket and slaked them down with just a bit of water. I sieved out the chunks until it created a slip a little less stiff than peanut butter. I loaded my cake icing squeeze bottles with the slip and tested it out. The slip should not be runny or come out like a dried-up snake. You want a nice flowing line. Onto the slightly stiffened-up cylinder, I just filled in the broad areas of the magnolia blossoms. I like to start with the petals in the back and work my way up to the front. In the broader areas, you can slow your progression and squeeze a little harder to create thicker lines. The good news is that this is not an exact science. You can go outside the lines and it won't matter a lot because every flower is different and unique. Playing with the viscosity of the slip will give you a lot of leeway to fill in your illustration in a variety of ways, giving the petals unique characteristics. Lighter squeezes will make thinner lines so you can draw stems and branches. There are many ways to approach your design rather than just the straight fill-in. You can outline areas, then fill them in as you go. You can squiggle the slip to give it character. You can just leave a side petal with an outline just to make it look like the edges are curled. You can swirl your lines around. If the slip is really thick, the lines you create will stay defined, leaving the petals with interesting lines. Once all the areas are filled in, I can leave the slip design as is and just let it dry to bone dry. Option 2 is to let it dry to leather hard and carve some details into the slip. I'll demonstrate that. Now here's a bowl that's now leather hard. I'll be using my paddle tool for this step. Before carving, I like to soften down the harder jagged edges a bit. I wet my finger and burnish over the lines of the design. This will soften up the clay so it won't chip during carving. Using my paddle tool, I angled the blade and began shaving away bits of clay to create turns and curls, plus thin out the edges of the petals. During the process, you'll create crumbs. I like to use a damp sponge to wipe away the crumbs. This will also continue to smooth away the more rougher edges as well. I continue looking at my petals and working the edges smoother, thinner, and more defined. If it helps, look at pictures of magnolia blossoms to get an idea of the formations that the petal blossoms create when they're opening up. Now here's how I ended up carving it. Now here's a carved cup that I created earlier that's bone dry. I also created a cup where I slipped the design and left it in its natural state with no carving, so you can see that either version will look nice, just different. Let's talk about how to finish these. One way is to leave the whole thing totally unglazed. Although if you want to add color and texture, you can paint underglaze over the design. On this bowl, I used a medium flat brush and painted 3 layers of baby blue over the entire border of the design. When it was entirely dry, I used a damp sponge and wiped away the highlighted areas. I was very conservative at first to soften up the underglaze and see what part of the design shows through first before getting more aggressive with the wiping. I was also careful to clean out my sponge often to avoid smearing the underglaze and achieving the cleanest design. One way I like to glaze these is to go over the slipped areas with my white liner glaze. I use a small detailer brush and thickened up the glaze a bit so I could just pat the glaze over the highlighted areas and it'll stay put. 2 to 3 layers of the glaze will be sufficient. I then use the same glaze on the inside and around the top and bottom borders of the outside. If you don't want to use underglaze, but you still want another way to add color, you can use glazes. My favorite way to do this is with the Amico Honeydew glaze. Using a broad, flat brush, I brushed on 3 layers of the glaze in that decorated center border. When the glaze was totally dry, I used a damp sponge like the other project to remove the glaze from the larger parts of the highlighted areas. On the smaller, thinner parts, like the branches, I gently scraped off the glaze from the highlighted parts with my cleanup tool. Now you can leave the highlighted areas as is with the bare clay showing through, or you can go one step further. Like the first project, you can brush over the highlighted areas with my white liner glaze. The 2 glazes work well together and leave different finishes for interesting textures. I slowly dabbed on 2 thick layers of the white glaze. I didn't worry that the 2 glazes were touching. The white glaze seems to stay put and keeps its integrity even if it overlaps the honeydew. I like to use fingernail detailing brushes. They really make a difference to create the finer lines. The synthetic bristles hold their points better than the fine art brushes. Now this is a cup that I created, leaving the slip as is with no carving. I underglazed around the slip design with Amico Baby Blue underglaze and then my white liner glaze over the slip design. I freehanded the little chicks and turned it into a chicken soup mug. Now this is a cup that I created with the uncarved slip design. I used the wiped back honeydew glaze over the center border, then the white liner glaze over the slip design. I thought I'd show you a cup with the carved slip design using the same glazing technique with the honeydew glaze and the white liner glaze. The white liner glaze actually covered over all the detail that I had carved, so I couldn't tell the difference between the carved slip and the non-carved slip design. Because I lost the detail on what I carved by glazing over the slip design on the last piece, I thought I'd try underglazing the design with baby blue, wiping back the highlighted areas, then brushing 2 layers of Amico C11 clear glaze over the underglazed area. Let me know which is your favorite version in the comments section below. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.